Alright, today we'll be talking about multiplying radicals, and we're going to fill in our graphic organizer as we go along working these problems. So just follow along. You can write down your information as I write it down up here on the board. So for multiplying radicals, it says up at the top, we can multiply radicals if they have the same index. So go ahead and fill in the word index. Now that's going to be true today for most of your problems. I'm not going to give you any that are different indexes. But it's important that anytime you have a problem, you always check to see if they have the same index before you multiply them. But today, everything that you'll get will have the same index. Now, underneath that, it has your steps. So your steps for doing these is pretty simple. So for the first step, we're going to write multiply the numbers. Multiply the numbers. I'm going to abbreviate numbers with a pound sign. Abbreviate the numbers outside the radicals. So multiply the numbers outside the radicals. So essentially the first thing we're going to do is multiply the numbers outside the radicals, or we're going to multiply the coefficients. The coefficients are going to be the numbers that come in front of the radicals. So we're going to multiply the two coefficients together first. Then our second step is to multiply the numbers under the radicals. So that's going to be our next one, number 2. Multiply the numbers inside the radical. Multiply the numbers inside the radicals. Now, also, numbers inside a radical, we also know those to be called the radicand. So we're going to multiply the radicands. So we multiply the coefficients, multiply the radicands, and then the last thing we do is simplify. Make sure you simplify, because we always want to get our answer down to its simplest form. So, pretty easy options there. The directions for this isn't too bad. Should be a pretty easy go at it for today's problems. So, like I said, it's essentially just multiply the outside, multiply the inside, and then simplify. Okay? So the first example we're going to look at is going to be the square root of 3 times the square root of 3. Now, when we think about a problem like this, what do we understand is the number that's written outside in front of each of these? 1. Okay? The coefficient understood to be out in front of these is 1. The index is represented by the number that would go up here, which would be 2's. Okay? But we understand that to be 2, so we know here we have the same index. So we're going to follow our steps. So first step is to multiply the outside numbers. So here we have a 1 times a 1. So what's 1 times 1? 1. Next, we're going to multiply the two inside numbers. So what's 3 times 3? So that's going to be the square root of 9. Now we need to simplify. So if we simplify this, we take the square root of 9. So what's the square root of 9? 3. So we're going to get 1 times 3, and then 1 times 3 is equal to 3. So, first problem is really simple, right? Multiply them out, multiply the outside, multiply the insides, simplify, and you have your answer. So, any questions on example 1? Everybody good with that?
Wait, so we put 3 underlined because it was
Yes, we multiply the 3 together here, so the 3 times the 3 is going to give us this 9, and then all we do is take the square root of 9, get 3, and 3 times 1 is 3. Alright, so for example 2, we're going to move over to our next side, which is going to give us 2 on the square root of 12, and then we're going to have 4 on the square root of 15. Alright, so real quick, I want to give you a second. You can pause the video and see if you can work this one out. Alright, so welcome back. Alright, so looking back up here at the board, same concept applies here. We want to multiply the two outside numbers, so that's going to be 2 times 4. So what's 2 times 4? 8. And then we're going to multiply the two inside numbers. That's step 2. So we're going to multiply 12 times 15, which is, so that's going to be the square root of 180. Now, all that's left to do here is simplify. So this goes back to what we've been talking about for like the past, I don't know, the whole week. All right? We've been breaking down these 180s, breaking down these numbers. So let's break down 180. So if I was to break down 180, me personally, I notice it ends in 0, so I know it's got to divide by 18 and 10. So when I break down 18 and 10, I know that 18 will break down into 9 and 2. 2 won't break down any further. And then 9 will break down into 3 and 3. 3 won't break down any further. The 10, we know the 10 is going to break down into 5 and 2. And we know the 2 and the 5 will not break down any further. So since I've circled a lot of numbers here, what I want to do is I want to write them down. So let's just write down everything I've circled. So I have a 2 times another 2 times a 3 times another 3 times a 5. So what this tells me is I have 2 pairs of 2s, I have a pair of 2s, a pair of 3s, and I have a 5 that's left over. So what that means is the 5 that's left over will go inside the radical, and then 2 times 3 is going to give me what on the outside? 6. Now, just like yesterday, we talked about how to multiply this number into it. So we're going to take that 8, multiply it times the 6. So 8 times 6 would give me what? So here my correct answer would be 48 on the square root of 5. Alright, so now let's look at our example 3. Example 3 is going to be in the bottom left-hand corner. Alright, so on this one we have the square root of 3, and that's going to be multiplied times 3 plus the square root of 6. So, to work with this one, we want to basically take and multiply this number throughout. In other words, this one's going to be more like distributing. Okay, so really what we're going to do here is we're going to take this number and we're going to multiply it times that 3, and we're going to then take this and multiply it times that. Now, the way this works is we have to multiply, it said in our notes that the first step was to multiply the outside number times the outside number. So in this case, what is understood to be our outside number for this? Okay, this is going to be understood to have an outside number of 1. So we want to take that 1, and since the 3 isn't underneath the radical, that's an outside number. So what's 1 times 3? Alright, we're going to get 3. Then, when we take this square root and multiply it over here, did we have a number under the radical over here? No. So if we don't, we're just going to take and put that right beside it. So basically we're saying 1 times 3 is 3, and then we just tack on our square root of 3 since there's nothing to multiply times it. It's like multiplying it times 1. Next, we're going to take the square root of 3 and we're going to multiply it times this part over here. So over here, what's the understood coefficient out front? 1. So what's going to be 1 times 1? Alright, so that's going to give us plus 1. And then 3 times 6 is going to give us what? 18. So that's the square root of 18. So what we've done so far is we've basically taken this 1 and multiplied it times the 3. 1 times 3 will give us the 3 in the front. Then we took this square root of 3 and multiplied it times understood 1 to get the square root of 3 on the end, since there was nothing under a radical over here to be multiplied. Then we took this second part and we said 1 times 1 to give us 1. And then we said 3 times 6 to give us 18. And now we have everything multiplied out. We've multiplied the insides times the insides and the outsides times the outsides. So what's left to do from here is break it down. We know that this 3 on the square root of 3 will not break down, so we're good with that. But with 18, we know 18 is going to break down into 6 and 3 or 9 and 2. I like 9 and 2, so let's go with that. We have a 2 left over, so break down the 9. The 9 breaks down into 3 and 3. The 3's won't break down, so we circle those. So here, since there's less numbers, we can look at it and see our pairs. So we have a pair of 3's, so that's going to be a 3 on the outside. And we have a 2 left over, so that's going to be 2 on the inside. Take that 1 that was in front, multiply it times the 3 in front, and then when we do that, we're going to get 1 times 3 is 3 on the square root of 2. We also had this 3 on the square root of 3 that was in front, so 3 on the square root of 3 goes in front, and those were positive. When we look at these two numbers here, they do not match up, so we know that's going to be our final answer for this problem. Questions? Alright, so the last problem we're going to look at, example 4, is going to be, this one's a little bit more challenging of a problem, but we need to know how to do it. So in this one we have 3 plus the square root of 3, and then we have 3 minus 4 on the square root of 3. Now, with a problem like this, it's like looking at it as if it was a binomial times a binomial, because here we have 2 terms, and then we have 2 terms. So we know this is like a binomial times a binomial. So feel free to treat it however you want to. You can do box strategy with this, or you can take and multiply it out using distributive property. If we did it with distributive property, what I would suggest doing is taking the 3 and writing it outside, and then taking the square root of 3 and writing it on the outside. Then I would take the entire binomial on the second part, and I would just write it twice. So that'd be 3 minus 4 on the square root of 3, and then 3 minus the square root of 3 minus 4 on the square root of 3. So then this would pretty much be like distribution, just multiplying it throughout the problem. So that's pretty. It makes it a little bit easier to see here. So on this one, first thing we would do is 3 times 3. So 3 times 3 would be 9. All right. 3 times negative 4 on the square root of 3. So 3 times the negative 4 would be negative 12. And then we have no other square roots to multiply, so that's just going to stay square root of 3. Here we have the square root of 3 times 3. So we're going to have positive 3 on the square root of 3. We didn't have anything to multiply there except for the understood 1 in the front. And then lastly, we have square root of 3 times negative 4 on the square root of 3. So we have 1 times negative 4, which is going to be negative 4. And then we have the square root of 3 times the square root of 3, which is going to be the square root of 9. Now, once we're to this point, everything else is a matter of breaking it down. So looking at it so far, it looks like we have a 9, so we're good with the 9. We have a negative 12 on the square root of 3. That won't break down, so that's negative 12 on the square root of 3. We have 3 on the square root of 3. That won't break down, so that's 3 on the square root of 3. And then we have this square root of 9. So with this, we know the square root of 9 is equal to what? 3. So 3 times negative 4 would be negative 12. So once I get it to this point, I'm going to combine what I have. I have a 9, and I have a negative 12. So 9 minus 12 will give me negative 3. And then I have this negative 12 on the square root of 3 plus 3. So here I need to combine the negative 12 and the positive 3. So negative 12 plus 3 is going to give me negative 9 on the square root of 3. Alright, go ahead and, like I said, rewind this. If you need to look at it a second time, that's okay. A lot of information was covered in this video. If you have questions, please raise your hand and let me know, and we'll talk a little bit more about this after the